Hey, it's Jack, and this video is I'm dying of loneliness. Will anyone ever love me? Hey, if you're new to the channel or you haven't yet subscribed, just go ahead, click the button here. You can subscribe to the channel. I release videos every 3 days on personal development and love and relationships, and tap that bell notification and then you'll hear of new videos as soon as they come out. So I've been invited by quite a few of you that are regulars on the channel. You've been wanting to have me talk about loneliness. And so here it is. I'm going to do a deep dive on this. I want to start off by saying I know this topic a little bit from the inside out. I wouldn't have historically described myself as someone prone to loneliness. But I've had periods of my life where I have very much spent a real amount of time on my own. And during that, I definitely had an experience of what it's like to feel lonely, what it's like to feel far from the crowd, the kind of apathy that can set in when it doesn't feel like there's many people knocking on your door, the phone's not ringing, text messages aren't coming in. I've also done that through times of being self-employed and probably at times underemployed, self-employed, if you know what I mean. So I kind of get this. I get what it's like for it to be 5 o'clock in the evening and you're already feeling lonely and you're starting to binge watch something on Netflix and it's kind of only getting worse every time an episode ends. You kind of don't want to feel things. You just click and you're just kind of watching and trying to numb yourself out. So I know what that's like. I know what it's like to not really know how to get out of that, or to even at times feel lonely but not really even want certain kinds of social contact. It's like I'm lonely but that person's hitting me up and right now I actually don't really feel like I want to go hang out with them. Right? So there's kind of internal conflict around, am I being a bit fussy? Should I just kind of get out and about? I know when I first started my business in the UK, I used to just go to the supermarket at lunchtime to buy a sandwich, not even a very glamorous sandwich, just because I needed to get out of the house and be around people. And it felt good to see, an old lady walking down the street, or a mum pushing a pram, or a toddler throwing a hissy fit, just to be reminded, oh wow, yeah, there's a world out there of people that have different problems and different needs and different realities that I'm moving in. But all of that to say, yeah, I feel for you. If you're having a lot of loneliness in your life, hang in there. I think I've got some stuff in this video that might help you, and it might be a little different than things you've heard before. It might at times be a little confronting. I just invite you to keep an open mind and see how you go. I'm not committed to being right in this territory. I am committed to doing what I can to help you. And so this is the best of what I know at this time in my life that might be able to help you. So I want to distinguish something off the bat, which is being alone and being lonely are two different things. And sometimes they often go together, but they don't have to. And what I mean in the difference is, being alone means spending time with other people not around, right? Being alone means spending time being with yourself. Feeling lonely or being lonely is the sense that I wish other people were around. I miss other people. I miss contact. I want more connection. Now, the reason I'm distinguishing them off the bat is there is a huge value to our aloneness. There is a huge value to spending time with ourselves. Now, it's too much for me to include in this video. I'm just going to give you kind of a quick helicopter view of some of the things that can happen when you start to spend time on your own. And this is particularly valuable, by the way, if you have never spent significant time on your own. And I'm just going to lay something down as like a big fat claim, and you can explore it for yourself. If you've never spent significant time alone, there will be limits to your development, particularly your spiritual development, your inner work. If you've never spent high quality time alone, you probably will struggle to get perspective on certain things. You might struggle to really differentiate what's yours and what's other people's. You might have challenges with your boundaries. If you've never spent time alone, you'll probably always fear being lonely because you haven't learned the difference between the two and you haven't seen the value in being alone. If you've never spent time alone, you will be less capable of a more mature relationship with other people on the whole, right? Because there are ways that you're going to probably use the relationship to stop you feeling your aloneness or feeling loneliness. So it kind of creates this sort of background dependency that is mostly unconscious, that doesn't actually need to be there. So all of this is to say you can take the fact that you might not be spending much time with other people, aka aloneness, and really turn it to your advantage and really see it as an important part of your path, not just maybe even an important part, a sine qua non, I don't know why I went into Latin there, sorry about that. An unavoidable part of your path, a part of your path without which you can't actually develop the sorts of capacities I'm talking about developing, like a necessary stage of development. Just like if you've never left your home, right? If you've always stayed exactly where you grew up, there are certain things that are probably going to be harder for you to learn about the world, right? There are things you learn about the world when you see people in different cultures, or when you move in different cities and countries. You notice the way that people are different. You notice things about yourself. You notice assumptions you didn't even know that you had, right? The value of diversity and multiculturalism is partly that value. Well, there's a similar thing that happens in your own development. When you've never really spent time outside of other people, you don't know your own strength. You don't know the bounds of your courage. You don't know your own heart sometimes in certain ways. You might lack empathy for people that maybe have grown up with fewer people around them, or have had to spend extended periods of time on their own. Or maybe you over-empathize, and anytime someone's alone for the evening, you think you've got to call them and keep them company because that's a problem, right? Whereas it might be that it's actually an opportunity. So that's aloneness and loneliness. Now, if you're having the experience of feeling lonely and it's really difficult for you to be with it, a couple of things. One is you might want to take aim at practicing, even in small doses, learning to be with the feeling, right? A lot of mature adult development seems to have to do with having an experience and not needing it to go away. Right? In lower levels of development, if you're lonely, we'll say, oh, look, go to the cinema, find a new hobby. Now, that might be great advice, and that might be relevant to you. And there also might be something else that's relevant to you, which is, oh, if I can actually learn to be with the feeling of loneliness, I don't have to do things in the external to fill a hole or a deficiency in myself. Right? Do you see how this might start to be a sort of a different consciousness or a different way of exploring your life? It's not like, oh, there's a feeling and I need to fix it. It's like there's a feeling. How about let me feel it? But let me feel it in a small enough dose that I'm not going to get overwhelmed by it, or I'm not going to get too far down the road of imagining I'm going to get stuck in it, right? That can be its own form of development, is to realize you're not going to get stuck in your emotions when you feel them authentically. Actually, they tend to arise and fall, move like clouds in the sky. You may or may not be there yet with your own feelings. I'm saying give yourself a chunk of reality that you can bite off and get your teeth stuck into, which in this instance is, can I feel loneliness for 5 minutes? Put the clock on, set the timer on your phone, see what that feeling's like, and then allow yourself to go do something else, right? Then go Netflix, cinema. But you're starting to gradually increase this capacity to be with these difficult feelings. This is the true path of freedom in my experience. The true path of freedom is to actually have freedom from your emotions, in the sense that you're not avoiding, suppressing, repressing, rationalizing, dissociating from them, right? You're actually able to be with them. And when you're able to be with them, they don't have the same power over you because you're not looking to avoid them. They can come in and you can say, oh, I'm experiencing some loneliness right now. Now, you may want to combine that with some skillful action in the external, not some action that stops you feeling things. It's a both and. I'm both going to feel this loneliness, and I might notice, I really do value connection, and connection is an important and beautiful part of being a human being, being an animal, being a social being. So maybe I'm going to feel some loneliness. Maybe I'll even journal about it for a little bit. And then I'm going to pick up the phone and try and make an authentic connection with someone I care about. Or if I don't have people in my life that I experience that way, I'm going to be in the process of cultivating that, right? Maybe I'm going to go on a friend date. Maybe I'm going to go on a romantic date. Maybe I'm going to rekindle an old connection. I'm going to energize that part of my life. So now I get the experience of, I can be alone. I can be alone, and at times I can feel lonely. I can feel lonely and I can be with it. And when I need to and want to, I can reach out and ask for contact from other people. Maybe if it needs it, you actually make a request for support, which is like, hey, reveal, I'm feeling a little bit lonely. I wonder if you might come and sit with me, or I'm feeling a little lonely. Would you be down to do something on the weekend? Or I would love to connect with you. Are you around tonight or on the weekend? So, the reveal is a part of actually, there's no shame in feeling lonely, right? There's no shame in feeling lonely. The loneliness, I think, is a sort of natural human feeling. And you could even reveal that in service of making your relationships more authentic and vulnerable and deepening them, and inviting someone into that world and being like, yeah, could you come and sit with me? You know, one of the things that's difficult for people who haven't been in a relationship for a while, and this might be you, is they can often experience a lack of touch, right? So sometimes you might even want to be able to include, is it possible for someone just to come and hold you or hold your hand, you know, or sit next to you on the sofa and you watch a movie together? There's all sorts of things that you might be able to do that actually invite, in a practical way, you to experience less loneliness, right? There might be some specific vectors of reality. You know, I've mentioned touch. Maybe it's just that you're sick of watching a movie alone. You want to do that together, or you want someone to go to the cinema with, you know, or you actually need to go shopping, but you're not very good at making decisions. And you want someone to support you in making some decisions about what's a good item of clothing to buy. And though there are certain things that are easier in a relationship often than they might be outside of a relationship, and you might find practical ways to meet some of those needs in a different way than you've currently constructed your life to experience them, right? So there can also be a bit of resourcefulness and a bit of skillfulness and some discrimination about, what is it that I really want? What is it that I'm missing? And that's a kind of authentic desire for me. But you get this balance. It's not, what am I missing? Let me avoid that. It's, what am I missing? I can feel the missingness, and I might have some authentic desires to cultivate and bring something new into my life. So I really want to impress upon you the kind of both andness of those things. And you know, the path of aloneness can be particularly important to learning where you finish and other people start. So you might have heard this, you know, it's kind of fancy terms. You might have heard the term differentiation. You might have heard the term individuation. And what these mean really is kind of coming into yourself more, finding your own ground, finding your own back and support of yourself, finding your own center, your own uprightness. Sort of, if you might notice as you practice this that you can be a little here, right? Your stance to life can be a little kind of leaned in, a little overly concerned with other people, their business, their feelings. You know, particularly if any of you have, you know, empathic qualities or helper qualities or teacher, mentor, coach, therapist, guide, any of those sorts of qualities, there's a chance that you might be a little over there with other people. And your own being on your own, aka being alone, can teach you kind of how to be in your own skin, how to become more comfortable in your own skin, how to really like your own company, right? That's a form of self-love, is to learn like, oh, I've got an evening to myself, rather than like, oh, I've got an evening to myself. It's like, I've got an evening to myself. I can get to know myself more. I can be with myself. I can hang out. I can explore a part of me. I can write. I can journal. I can create poetry. I can paint. I can make music. I can sing. I can dance. I can move. I can rest. I can meditate. I can pray. There's so many things that you can do on your own. And in fact, you can only really do in a high quality way sometimes when you are on your own. Right? So there's a whole set of gifts and opportunities to spending time on our own that you may or may not have really explored. Now, this will be even more true probably if you are a naturally extroverted person, right? If life is a kind of party, if life is really happening through connections with other people, through being in the social mix, through going out, through getting external stimulation, that's all awesome. You can keep that. And it might be that in your integration, right, in your development, the next thing for you to cultivate is your introversion, right? You can look at extroversion, introversion as if they're fixed propensities. There may be some truth that the propensity is somewhat fixed, and I've noticed a lot in my own life and my clients' lives, a lot of movement and a lot of latitude to develop the facets of us that are somewhat neglected and underdeveloped. So you might not even have a relationship with your own introversion. You might not know what it's like to develop introverted feeling, right? The ability to really sense and feel inwards to yourself, not just feelings you pick up from connections with other people, but to know what are my own internal feelings. You might not know what it's like to cultivate introverted thinking, right? Your ability to process internally. You might be someone that processes out loud with other people. You're not going to lose that, but you might also learn what's it like to process through a journal, or what's it like to process just by being with myself and kind of mentally or emotionally unpacking, aka metabolizing an experience. Right? Sometimes if we're so extroverted, there's a danger that we haven't really metabolized, right? Like we're taking a lot of life in, but it's kind of getting a bit stuck because we haven't really unpacked it. There's a lot of stuff in, I call them psycho-emotional decks. Our psychological emotional decks aren't clear. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of clogged in there because it hasn't had a time to process through. That's part of the value of aloneness, is you start to notice things and process them in a way that you might not have before. You might also start to process things that have kind of been unprocessed for years and decades. That can be a thing. Now, you might say, well, that's too much. Again, you can titrate it. You might just say, hey, my challenge is for the next hour, I'm going to kind of cultivate my aloneness. I'm going to cultivate my relationship with myself. And it's an hour, and I might be bored out of my mind. My mind might be spinning and screaming, but it's an hour or 30 minutes, whatever you can do. Take aim at it. Start small and grow it. But that capacity, I think, is a really valuable capacity. And it's a really valuable capacity to bring into relationship when the right relationship and guy shows up. Because then you can both ideally have some access to your extroversion and introversion. It gives the relationship more range. It means that if one partner is out doing something, the other partner can enjoy their alone time, and vice versa. It means you're less likely to create unconscious codependency. All sorts of upsides from learning how to be with your own aloneness and self. It's right, self and other. Other is not more important than self. Right? And you might think, well, if I start to make self so important, maybe I'm going to become a narcissist, right? Or maybe I'm going to become super egotistical into myself. If you haven't cultivated self, I don't really have that fear for you. Let that fear be known, in the sense, let it happen that happens, and then you can look at it and you can kind of course correct. But if you've mostly been over there with other people, it's unlikely that suddenly you're going to be so over here with yourself. Right? It's more like, oh, I'm still going to start balancing and integrating these other capacities. So I hope I've given you another spin on the value of aloneness and why you want to be in relationship with your own loneliness. It's an invitation to something deeper. It's a calling to the spiritual path. It's a calling to know the value of other people, know the value of relationships, as well as know the value of yourself. If you've never been with yourself in a meaningful way, there's a way that you can't really have your own back in life, right? There's always this sort of mild kind of dependence on other people. And we do depend on other people, right? Like everything that I eat, I didn't grow it, I didn't cultivate it, I didn't ship it, I didn't package it. We do definitely have a dependency on life and other people, but there are these kind of forms of unconscious and unhealthy dependency that we might want to start to distinguish and have them relax in our life. And those forms of unconscious dependency are more likely if you don't know what it's like to really be with yourself and like the company that you keep. And at times you may not like the company you keep, and that's okay as well. Right? Part of self-love is not that you always feel loving to yourself. It's that you have this kind of loving orientation to yourself even when you don't like yourself. Right? And that might sound a bit paradoxical, but it's like, yeah, right now I'm kind of down on myself, but I don't need to abandon myself. I don't need to make it worse. I can just notice, yeah, I'm a little bit down on myself. And can I invite something more loving in? That's really the practice of self-love. It's not like we're looking for a steady state. And self-love is hard to cultivate if you've never had time to spend with yourself. If you have a child and you never spend time with them, we will probably infer that you don't love them in certain ways or you're not attending to them in certain ways. How can you claim the same thing about yourself if you never love and attend to yourself? There is no real self-love without aloneness, in my experience. Please, below the video, if you have a very different experience. But if you've never spent that kind of high quality time getting to know yourself, what is there to love? You don't know yourself. If I say to you that I love languages, and you say, great, which languages do you know? And I say, oh, well, I haven't never learned any. I just like the idea. I don't love languages. I don't know them. There's no intimacy. There's no cultivation. There's no presence and attention. It's exactly the same thing with yourself. Can you cultivate the presence and attention that you give to yourself? And you can't do that without aloneness. And if you're going to go and walk the path of distinguishing and appreciating your own aloneness, guess what? Loneliness is going to be part of that, right? I don't think you can really walk that path of aloneness with, at times, maybe you go a bit too far, or maybe you don't have people in your life, or maybe you're completely bored with your own company and you feel alone. That is important to notice, that you don't get a free pass there, right? That's part of the process. That in order for you to differentiate, in order for you to individuate, in order for you to love yourself, in order for you to have a healthy center to take into an interdependent relationship, at times you will feel lonely. And if you already feel like you've got buckets of loneliness bleeding its way through your own life, may that be an invitation to your own wakefulness. May that be an invitation to your own self-reflection and cultivation. May that be an invitation for you to finally distinguish the freedom that comes not from avoiding the experience of loneliness, but by really knowing it intimately and loving and not abandoning yourself at the same time. All right, that's my preach. If you've liked what you've seen here, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. I'd love for you to take my free webinar. If you haven't, you can just click the link below this video and find a time that works for you in your time zone. It's a cool webinar. It's completely free. I would do it if you haven't done it. You will get value from it. And as always, I'm Jack. Thanks for being here.